you are not perfect. You're kind of annoying and you've made a lot of mistakes. And that's okay, and your characters should be the same way. If you're still writing flat characters who are flawless, perfect people, or you're picking out character flaws from a character traits list, this video is going to fix that. You're welcome. If you're new here, hi, I'm Katri, I'm your new flawed best friend, and this is Protagonist Craft, the place for people who are kind of obsessed with that whole writing thing. If you'd like to learn more about writing great stories, you could show great character strength by subscribing to Protagonist Crafts. Do it now. So you may have heard of character flaws and character weaknesses, and I'm happy to tell you that they are both the same thing. I just prefer to talk about flaws, mainly because I write a lot about writing. And do you know how many letters weaknesses has? 10! And don't even get me started on strengths. I know perfectly well how to spell it, and still my fingers on the keyboard, they do it wrong every time. We need to come up with a better word for it. Something like flaws. Slaws, maybe. So much easier. Flaws and slaws. But anyway, what are character flaws exactly? So a character flaw is a personality trait that has negative effects. But that said, it actually depends on context, what is negative and what is positive, and that is a good thing, and we will circle back to that later. But first, we need to talk about what kind of flaws does your character actually need. So you can actually have two types of flaws. One is psychological flaws that hurt the character themselves, and the second one is moral flaws that hurt other people. I've also seen people suggest that there's something like social flaws, but I wouldn't go as far as say there's something like poverty is a character flaw because ugh. And it's important to have both kinds of flaws, because if your character is only hurting themselves, they're going to look like some kind of a sad sack that nobody really wants to read about. We want to read about capable people who can do stuff and who aren't just victims. But if you only have moral flaws, then your character is going to seem like a right bastard that isn't really enjoyable to read about. And also, we as humans, we have complex flaws and personality traits that manifest in different ways. So it's just realistic. So maybe you have a character who is always mean to other characters, so they're hurting other people. But maybe they're actually doing that because they're scared of letting people close. So they're hurting themselves by pushing those people away with their mean comments. And for the sake of believability, you need to be demonstrating these flaws straight from the beginning of your story, and definitely in the first few pages. We don't need to see the full repercussions of these flaws straight away. We just need to see the potential, and we need to know that they are there. You can and you should escalate things, but that requires that you start from somewhere, and that somewhere needs to be in the very beginning, or from the very beginning where you are showing this character. If this character doesn't show up in the first 10 pages, then yeah, you can't show their flaws in the first 10 pages, but you know what I mean here. But does every character need flaws? Yes, they do. Next question. Okay, fine. Let's elaborate. Characters without flaws, they are both boring and unrealistic. And yeah, some people like these perfect cinnamon bun characters, but those characters don't actually have a lot going on for them, and they're not creating plot events for you. And if you're writing a story, you're going to need plot events. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that. And every now and then I stumble upon these internet conversations, and let's be real, it's usually on Reddit, about how some characters, they are just so annoying. And when I go and read what is the problem, then it's just the character demonstrating their flaws. And no, you don't have to like every character. You don't have to accept them or approve of them. I mean, that would be silly. You don't like and approve of every person in your life. But it's just absurd to expect your characters to be perfect all the time. Every person ever, yourself included, makes mistakes. No flaws and no mistakes equals no plot. Is that what you want? Look what terrible idea. I found a kitten. I found a kitten. Do you love her? I don't think she likes being held. What do you think? She is obsessed with me, but she doesn't want to be on camera. I'm so sorry, but she is, I promise you, she is adorable. She is called Raisin. Oh, okay, bye-bye. Anyway, another flavor of this same phenomenon is being am I weird for liking this character? I mean, they're so bad. Is it just me? I found my pen again. You are not liking that character by accident. They were written so that you would also like them despite their glaring flaws. Maybe you also have those same flaws and that's why you gravitate towards them. Are you suggesting that nobody should like you? Thomas Barrow from Downton Abbey, for example, he's a perfect train wreck. He's a weasel.
Because you are sly and oily and smug.
And I love him. You should also love him. He's a wonderfully written character. He's a terrible person. I love him. He's a great character. Do you see? It doesn't mean you have to approve of anything that he has done. You can still like him as a character. I mean, I don't approve of everything that you have done. Also, I've noticed that almost every time someone talks about Gilmore Girls on Instagram, somebody needs to rush in and say, Lorelai is a terrible mother. Rory is actually really annoying and problematic. And to them, I want to say, and? It's called The Gilmore Girls, not The Perfect People Show. The latter would be incredibly boring and you wouldn't be watching it. Let's say it again. Just because you like a character, it doesn't mean that you approve of everything that they do. Just because you write a certain type of character also doesn't mean that you approve of everything that they do. Just make no mistake here, you wouldn't be nearly as interested in any stories if the characters were perfect, flawless people who made no mistakes and had no flaws at all. So don't cheat your readers out of reading about interesting characters either. Don't be scared, give your characters real flaws. But did you know sometimes character flaws and character strengths can be the different sides of the same coin? For example, maybe you have a character who is very brave. He is so brave. But what if they're a bit too brave? What if they somehow endanger themselves and a bunch of other people just because they are so brave? Or maybe you've got a character who is kind, but in their kindness they actually let a very bad person close because they don't want to question their motives or just they don't want to see their bad side. They're being so kind. And then this person takes advantage of that. And you could be say, well, that isn't kindness. That is being a doormat. That isn't bravery, that's being foolhardy. But like I said, the different sides of the same coin. And you don't even need to take a strength to an extreme for it to have negative consequences. For example, maybe you have a genius and then people don't like this person because somehow what they like comes off as arrogance. Because maybe other people, they're just feeling insecure about their intelligence. Or maybe you have a character who is very positive and then there are people who find them annoying because they're just maybe a bit too positive. And as you can also see here, I hope that people love to make their own flaws other people's problems. So make use of that in your stories as well because flaws and even strengths clashing creates friction and that creates plots. For example, I do my best to be thorough and fastidious with most things I do, or at least things that I know actually matter. And that's a good thing, right? But then there are people who are relaxed, spontaneous. Those are also good qualities, I'm sure, but I wouldn't want to travel with those people and I do not want a golden retriever boyfriend. So really think about people you know, think about yourself and think of your flaws and your strengths. Think of how they work together and also how they clash together. So as a strength can be annoying, a flaw can also become an advantage in your story. So maybe you have a character who is a bit too shy to properly participate in things. And then they end up witnessing something that other people miss. Or maybe you've got a character who's just really grumpy and off-putting, and they inadvertently end up pushing away a character who would have taken advantage of them. And hey, what if something that is a flaw actually isn't one to the right people or in the right environment? What if it's okay to be quiet and bookish? What if it's okay to be loud? What if it was never a bad thing to be afraid of the dark? In addition to flaws, your characters also need problems. But how are they different? So flaws, as we talked about earlier, are character traits. But problems, they're usually sort of actionable things that your characters are struggling with. For example, having no money can definitely be a problem, but it's not a character flaw, it's not a personality trait. But being a compulsive gambler, that is definitely a big flaw, and that could lead to the problem of having no money. Flaws and problems often are connected, and actually in your story they should be, because everything should belong in your story and should have some kind of a purpose. So make whatever character traits and problems you choose do the work in your story. And your main character should have two kinds of problems. They should have ongoing problems that they were already struggling with, and then they should have the big problem of the story, also known as main conflict. But I just like to call it big problem because, that is very self-explanatory. And usually this big problem is exacerbated by the character's ongoing problems and their character flaws. Yikes! You may have also heard about the shadow or the shard of glass or the past wound or something to that effect. And that is when something has happened in the character's past that still has a negative effect. And often this character's ongoing problems are because they are dealing badly with this shard of glass or whatever you want to call it. So it's like an unholy trifecta. You've got flaws, past wounds, and ongoing problems. That's already a lot of tension on the page before we've even got to the big problem that is going to change everything for your character. And like I said earlier about character flaws, you need to show all that stuff in action as early as you can, even if it's in very small ways, because that can be extrapolated from later. And when you think about those three things in relation to the big problem, they need to be a perfect match. And when I say a perfect match, I mean a match made in hell. How will the character's flaws and ongoing problems make the big problem even worse? And how will dealing with this big problem also necessitate dealing with their past wounds? And how is this big problem, this main conflict, particularly bad for this specific character? So it all needs to work together, and that's why you can't just choose things at random from a list. So as you can see, character flaws don't just make your character real and interesting. They are plot fuel. Like we just talked about, the big problem is a big problem precisely because this character doesn't have a solution to it straight away. If they did, it wouldn't be a story, it would just be a Tuesday. So all these problems this character has, they shouldn't be solving them in just one fell swoop. They need to be working for the solutions. That is great news for you because that's how you create your plot. I also have a video on it, so check it out. And character flaws will make the problems harder initially, but they also contribute to how things escalate later on and how around the third quarter of your story, things will be getting really dark. You may have heard of the dark night of the soul, for example. So flaws, they play a part in that because these characters' flaws and their mistakes, they need to be catching up to them because they haven't yet changed as a character. So you need to be escalating things there. And again, more plot events for you. Yay! If a character solves all their problems way too easily, it doesn't make up for a credible story, it doesn't really make sense, and you might just have plot hole. But should your characters fix their flaws? Because actually your characters dealing with their flaws, that is also a part of the plot. Because of all the events in the story, your character becomes a changed character. So they change as people, they learn new things, they find new perspectives to life, they learn new information, stuff like that. That is also how they end up fixing their flaws, and there are a few ways to do this. Pay close attention here, alright? Your characters shouldn't become perfect people by the end of your story. You don't need to change all of their flaws into strengths because that would be unrealistic, but also you would need a lot of plot events to enact that much character change, and you might not be writing a story that starts from the day that this character was born to the day that they died, Your story is usually more focused than that. It's about the most interesting thing that ever happened to this character. So it's just a slice of their whole lifetime. There's only so much character change that you can have in that time. So here are some ways that your characters can deal with their flaws. They can stop a personality trait from ruling and ruining their life. Their flaw is no longer a flaw, or at least not a big deal, with the right people and in the right environment. They forgive or they let something go. They see something differently now because they learned or experienced something that altered their perception. They heal emotionally. They learn new information that clears a misconception they had about the world or about a person or about themselves. They find someone who accepts them exactly as they are, despite of their flaws or maybe even because of them. But whatever it is, there should have been some kind of obstacles in the way before, so why couldn't they forgive earlier? Why didn't they have that skill sooner? Why didn't they have that sort of perception before? Otherwise, your story will lack credibility and you might, again, have a plot hole. I mean, why didn't that character fix all their problems in one afternoon? Show us why. Even if your character tries to solve their problems in a way that seems counterintuitive or in a way that you personally wouldn't do it or your audience might not do it, that's okay. You just need to have the reasons there on the page. And actually, even if they are doing what everyone thinks that they would be doing, you still need to be showing the reasons there in your story. That is your responsibility. And we actually talk about that a lot in my video about plot holes. I mean, really, isn't it incredibly frustrating watching a character act like an idiot for no apparent reason? Like, you just know that the writer was like, well, they need to be struggling. They can't solve their problems straight away, so they made them struggle, but didn't actually give them any kind of a reason for it. It's a bit like when you're playing hide and seek with your children and you're pretending you're not finding them. Oh, I wonder where they are. It's a bit like that. Don't do that. By the way, if you've ever wondered what kind of a parent am I, you should know I never let my children win at anything. If they want to win, they need to win fair and square. And if they want to play hide and seek with me, they'd better have really good hiding places, because I'm not going to pretend I don't see them when I can very well see they are under the carpet right in the middle of the living room. So yeah, anyway, sometimes your character changes and sometimes the world around them changes. But it could just as well be as simple as a change in perspective. I mean, it's pretty difficult to stay angry when you find out that you were never angry for the right reasons. Of course, sometimes your hero succumbs to their problems, but usually stories end up with like, well, things turned out for the better after all, even if it didn't happen in the way that we thought that it would. And actually, more often than not, your story their problems, they should be solved in a way that wasn't obvious at the beginning of the story. Because again, they were a flawed character. This flawed character wouldn't have access to the right solution in the beginning because, again, they were a flawed character. And it's even better if your readers don't know what the right solution to their problems is until it happens. By the way, if you'd like an easy way to turn your character flaws into a page-turning plot, you're going to need my genius plotting system, where you learn something called the troublemaker method of generating plot events. No bots needed, by the way, and all my best outlining tools. And flaws are especially important in a romance novel because those flaws, or perceived flaws, are something that keep the lovers apart until these flaws are dealt with. Because in a romance novel, your characters can't be truly choosing love until all their stuff has been dealt with. Well, not all their stuff, obviously, but the things that pertain to this specific story. So yeah, hopefully by now you've figured out that character flaws can't be chosen at random. They need to be highly relevant to your plot. And you know what? We're also going to talk about show, don't tell. Don't just say she was a very angry girl and she was impatient and all this got her in trouble at the school and therefore her academic success suffered. Don't be lazy and don't treat your readers like they're dummies. Instead, show these flaws in action. You could show them getting in trouble with the headmaster who then says that he will never write her the recommendation letter for the college of her dreams. We'll be able to see those flaws and then imagine future repercussions while also being pulled straight into your story's world. That's what you want. In the very beginning of your story, you need to be showing your character's potential in good and in bad. If a character ends up killing someone on page 250, you need to much earlier on show them, for example, being cruel to someone or following orders blindly or protecting someone fiercely, whatever the reason is that this character ends up doing this very violent deed. Yes, things will escalate, but that's why you need to set them up properly. You need to show your readers where things started, or otherwise it doesn't make sense. And again, let's say together, you might have a plot hole. It shouldn't be completely obvious how things will turn out, but there should be signs, there should be the possibility. And you know what? The points of view that you have chosen, it matters here as well. So if you're writing from first person or from third person intimates, you can't have your characters just straight up stating what they're like as a person. For example, I don't wake up most mornings or actually any mornings thinking about stuff like, I am a writer, I am 36 years old, I have 2 children aged 7 and 10. Actually, some mornings I do wake up thinking, shit, I have 4 cats. What kind of a person has 4 cats? But yeah, anyway, maybe that is my character flaw. So that's why it would be kind of silly for your characters to just be like straight up stating what they're like as a person or any kind of details about their life. It needs to come up organically, and again, you need to show it. And since we're talking about flaws in particular, there's a lot of stuff about people that we don't talk about or we don't admit to ourselves, and things that we just aren't aware of, and flaws are a big thing that we just don't want to think about. So it would be kind of unrealistic for your character to be like, oh yes, I have a bad temper and that stops me from advancing in my career. That is a big problem. Unless, of course, that was some kind of a total BS problem that was hiding the real problem that they can't admit to themselves, or especially not to other people. Remember, people in general, they are very stupid about themselves, and most aren't going to therapy. So give them time to figure out their flaws for themselves. Characters who are too self-aware are boring. They are useless. Don't write about them. If you're writing from the omniscient point of view, you have a bit more leeway here in how you describe your characters. However, you still need to be interesting, which is very, very important when you're in the omniscient point of view. And just listing out what your character is like probably isn't interesting. By now you might be wondering, are there such thing as bad character flaws? And something that would be a bad character flaw is a character trait that is supposedly a flaw, but that doesn't actually have any kind of negative repercussions. That's not a flaw, that's just a flaw. What if your character is a bad person? Can their flaws be that they're racist or really violent? What if they kick children and kittens every day? Can you write about truly bad people? If you have a violent character, are you promoting violence perhaps? You should be allowed to have every kind of characters in your story, and you should be able to write any kind of stories. It doesn't mean that you approve of the actions of these characters or that you are encouraging your readers to be like these characters. When you have a character who's doing bad things or who has very big flaws, it doesn't directly translate to, oh, this is awesome, I'm promoting this kind of behavior with my story. Of course, you could, maybe you are doing that, but what you're actually saying with your story, it's a big subject that is way outside the scope of this particular video. Oh, one of my lights just died, thanks a lot. But you know what might just be a bad flaw? And I know we talked about perspective before, but just because you think something is a flaw doesn't mean that it is one. Is your character overweight, unattractive, poor, mentally ill, gay? They could be all those things, and it still doesn't mean that any of those things are a character flaw. I hope this helps. No, but really, just because you personally don't want to be something or you think being somewhere is bad, it doesn't mean that it is a character flaw. And it definitely doesn't mean that it's bad to be that way. And yet, sure, being disabled, being mentally ill, it can have very profound negative effects in a person's life, especially if their environment is made so that they can't function properly or if they're in pain a lot. But again, it isn't a personality trait and it isn't a character flaw. It has nothing to do with their personality or their personal behavior. Of course, you can write these types of characters, but what I'm saying here is that they should have some actual flaws as well. And for the love of Pete, don't write about how they needed to be fixed in order to be happy. We don't need any more ugly duckling stories, all right? You don't need to overcome ugliness by becoming beautiful. You are not writing a 90s teen comedy. And healing from a physical ailment shouldn't be the primary transformation that your character goes through, unless they were resisting the healing somehow. Like maybe they were a surly doctor who just doesn't want to get his leg fixed because he likes being angry and likes being addicted to painkillers. Why is this? Because if you think that lack of health is a character flaw, You are ableist. I hope this cleared things out. Now, all this might sound like work, and you're right, it is work. It is the work of the writer, and isn't that why you're writing stories to begin with? If you need more help with that, just check out the description for very, very, very useful links, and I will see you in another video or at the bookstore or wherever. Now go write your dumbass characters.